We will have so much more fun without you. The words echoed in my ears long after the phone call ended. I stared blankly at the wall of my apartment, the silence around me suddenly deafening. My mother's voice, always sharp and certain, had never sounded so deliberate and cruel. I tried to laugh. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe they were testing me, one of Mom's twisted little games. But then I checked the family group chat again. The photos told a different story. Sun-soaked smiles, poolside drinks, matching shirts that read, Summer 2023, Family First. Except I wasn't in any of the photos, not even a mention. Just days before, I'd been told the annual family vacation would be postponed due to budgeting. No trip this year. We all need to be more responsible, Dad had said in his classic voice of calm logic. So I canceled my leave at work and rescheduled meetings I had carefully cleared. And now here they were. Mom, Dad, my two brothers, their wives, and even my teenage niece, posing in front of the 5-star Amalfi Coast resort I had suggested 6 months ago. No explanation, no invitation, just silence. Until I called. Claire, Mom had sighed, exasperated. You're always so sensitive. We just thought we could use some time to relax without any intensity. Intensity, I'd repeated. You're always working, always serious. Honestly, we'll have so much more fun without you. That was the moment. The second something inside me didn't just crack, it snapped. But I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply said, "Got it. Thanks for the clarity," and hung up. I sat alone for hours, unmoving. Not sad, not exactly. Number like I'd just watched myself get written out of my own life story. This wasn't new, not really. I'd been the afterthought for years. Growing up, I was the organized one, the old soul. While my brothers wrestled, partied, and racked up demerits, I color-coded my notes and taught myself how to build websites in middle school. I got my first job at 16, full ride to Stanford, MBA at Wharton. And by 32, I was heading strategy at a growing hospitality tech startup. But at home, none of it mattered. I was just Claire, the uptight one, the too serious sister, the difficult daughter. When I bought my first condo, Dad made a comment about me, overcompensating for not having a boyfriend. When my app got featured in Forbes, Mom said, "Oh, your brother's friend got an article in something called Business Insider. That's similar, right?" It was like I was invisible unless they could somehow use me. And maybe that's what stung the most. That after everything, the time, the calls I answered late at night, the flights home for every birthday and graduation, they didn't just forget me. They chose to leave me out. Still, it wasn't until later that night, as I lay in bed scrolling through the hotel's website, that an idea began to take shape. A ridiculous, delicious, impossible idea. The resort looked familiar. I recognized the branding. Not surprising. The logo design and customer journey map came from a boutique consultancy I'd quietly acquired last year. Through a shell company, my startup had purchased a portfolio of small agencies specializing in high-end hospitality rebrands. And this particular resort? One of our flagship success stories. I tapped through the staff bios, and there he was, Luca D'Angelo, general manager, former mentor, one of the kindest, sharpest minds I'd worked with in Italy. I clicked contact, but didn't type anything yet. Instead, I stared at the blinking cursor and asked myself one question. What would happen if they saw me not as Claire the afterthought, but as Claire, the architect of the very luxury they were now enjoying without me? The next morning, I pulled out my laptop, brewed a double espresso, and got to work. The plan had to be meticulous, strategic, cinematic. Because this time, I wasn't just going to show up. I was going to show them exactly who they had underestimated. And it would begin with one perfectly timed email. Subject, Presidential Suite Reservation Request. Claire Moretti. CEO Luca responded within 6 hours. Cara Claire, of course I remember you. What a surprise. I had no idea you were connected to H&T Ventures. Makes perfect sense now. What can I do for you? His warm, slightly formal tone made me smile. He always called me Cara, dear. It reminded me of late-night work sessions in Milan, back when I was still proving myself and he was running operations like a symphony. He had taught me more about grace under pressure than any professor ever could. They're staying at your hotel, Luca, my family, but they don't know I'm connected to the property. Ah. His reply came after a pause. Understood. Say no more. Just tell me what you'd like to arrange. And so I did. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about perspective. If they couldn't see me when I stood in front of them, maybe they'd finally see me when I walked in through a different door. The one with power behind it. I booked the presidential suite for myself. A sprawling villa-style setup on the cliffside, with private terraces and a full staff team. I also booked the Florentine ballroom for a private VIP client experience to take place on their last night. Luca didn't even flinch. He upgraded their rooms to the executive tier, comped under a strategic client courtesy, and promised to discreetly manage the reveal. Shall I inform them ahead of time? He asked in a follow-up call. No, I said, sipping my espresso. Let it unfold naturally, but when I arrive, I'd like the manager on duty to greet me personally. Make it elegant. Of course, Claire, with pleasure. And just like that, the game was set in motion. But I wasn't going to show up in the middle of their vacation as the angry outcast crashing the party. That would have just confirmed their worst assumptions about me. I had a week to prepare. A week to become not just someone they couldn't ignore, but someone they never imagined they'd need to respect. I dove into the details with surgical focus. Wardrobe, clean lines, tailored, neutral luxury. I had no interest in designer labels screaming for attention, but everything I packed whispered custom-made. Linen jumpsuits from a tiny atelier in Palermo, sandals from a family-run leather workshop in Ravello, a pendant that used to belong to my grandmother, reset into a minimalist gold setting. Makeup? Light. Hair? Polished but simple. No overcompensation, no performance. Power, when real, doesn't need a costume. And yet, beneath the poise I was curating, something darker simmered. I couldn't stop hearing Mom's voice. We'll have so much more fun without you. That was the part that hit me hardest. Not the fact that they lied, not the fact that they went without telling me, but that sentence, that cruel little truth they didn't bother to dress up. It had been hanging in the air my entire life. They just finally said it out loud. So I channeled it. I funneled every bit of that sting into the plan. I even reviewed the hotel's guest interaction protocol, the very playbook I helped draft for Luca's property when we overhauled their luxury experience flow. I made notes on how the front desk should address me, when to offer the champagne, and how to cue the staff for recognition. This wasn't about spectacle. It was about precision. By Friday morning, my flight itinerary was confirmed. A private charter arranged by my firm's travel partner. My assistant, Natalie, looked up from the screen when she handed me the final printout. You know, they're not going to see this coming. I'm not doing this for them to be shocked, I replied. I'm doing it so I never have to shrink again. She paused, then nodded. Well, I hope you make them uncomfortable enough to finally sit in their silence. I smiled. Natalie had been with me since I started building this company out of a shared office space and a secondhand MacBook. She knew the weight I carried, and where it came from. That night, I packed everything with calm exactness. Then I sat at my desk and wrote one last thing. A letter. Not for them, for myself. A reminder that my worth never depended on their acceptance. I folded it and placed it inside my carry-on next to my boarding pass. As I zipped the bag, I glanced out at the city skyline, glowing against the night. They'd made the trip without me. Now I was coming, but on my own terms. And they had no idea that the woman walking through the marble lobby next would be the one who owned the story they were still trying to write me out of. The resort came into view like a dream. White stone buildings carved into the cliffs, olive trees swaying in the breeze, and the sea stretched out in endless blue. As the car climbed the winding road, I sat in the back seat in silence, hands folded, posture composed. Luca had sent a private driver, of course, a black Mercedes with tinted windows and chilled mineral water waiting in the cup holder. I could have arrived on the same shuttle service the rest of the guests used. I could have passed through the same check-in lines, allowed chance to dictate the encounter. But this wasn't about chance. This was about clarity. The car slowed as we passed the entrance gate, where a discreet gold sign read, Villa Carmela, a Sullivan and Moretti property. My name wasn't on it, of course, not publicly, but I'd overseen the merger that brought this property into our portfolio. I'd been the one to negotiate the architectural changes that elevated it into a luxury sanctuary. Now I was here to walk through the world I had helped build, and finally be seen. The Mercedes pulled into the circular driveway lined with cypress trees. Bellboys moved with practiced elegance, welcoming guests in soft tones. As my driver opened the door, I stepped out calmly, taking in the view like I belonged. Because I did. Miss Moretti. A familiar voice called from the marble steps. Luca, ever impeccable in a navy suit and a linen pocket square, approached with a warm smile and outstretched hands. Benvenuta. Welcome home. Thank you, Luca, I replied, returning his embrace. It's good to be here. I've taken care of everything, he said, lowering his voice. Your suite is ready, the staff is briefed, and the family arrived yesterday afternoon. They're lively, as expected. I gave a dry laugh. That's one word for it. As he led me through the lobby, all cascading light and hand-carved wood accents, guests turned to glance at me, subtly curious. I didn't stand out. Not flashy, not famous, but I carried myself like someone who didn't need permission to be there. That's the difference I'd learned. Not the clothes, not the titles, the knowing. We passed the reception desk where the clerk greeted me as Signora Moretti and presented my room key with a velvet-lined folder. Within minutes, I was being escorted to the presidential suite via a private elevator, while a second staff member took my luggage through a side entrance to avoid disturbance. The suite was just as I remembered from the design mock-ups. Italian marble floors, panoramic views of the coast, an infinity pool that seemed to pour into the sea. Every detail, from the citrus-scented towels to the curated art, spoke of understated opulence. I stood by the window for a moment, looking down at the main pool area. There they were, my family, sunbathing, drinking, laughing. My mother reclined beneath a striped umbrella, talking animatedly to my brother Mark. Dad was chatting with the bartender. Olivia, my niece, scrolled through her phone while dipping her feet in the water. And then, there she was. My other sister-in-law, Tessa, wearing the same silk wrap I had gifted her last Christmas, the one she'd claimed she never received. I watched them through the glass as a dull ache pressed behind my ribs. Not anger, not even betrayal. Just a familiar kind of absence. A hollow where belonging should have been. The doorbell rang. Miss Moretti. The concierge said softly, Your welcome lunch is served on the terrace. Perfect, I replied. Please let the front desk know I'll be attending the client event in the ballroom tomorrow. Oh, and make a note for the kitchen. No shellfish. My niece is allergic. He blinked, surprised. Of course, we'll accommodate that right away. Small details. Tiny threads of care. Quiet reminders that I knew these people better than they ever tried to know me. That afternoon, I moved through the property like a ghost. I didn't approach them. Didn't interrupt their illusion. But I was there. In the hallway behind them at dinner. In the elevator, one floor above. In the same boutique where Tessa complained about the wine prices, not realizing the bottle she was holding bore a label I had helped bring to market. At one point, I caught my niece looking up from the poolside lounge and spotting me through the restaurant window. Her gaze lingered, curious. I simply smiled. Then turned and walked away. Tomorrow would be the reveal. But today? Today was the calm before the shift, and I wanted them to feel it. That unsettled breath. That flicker of something they couldn't quite name. because something was coming, and it had my name on it. The next morning began like a scene from a film. Clear skies, a slow breeze carrying the scent of jasmine and salt, the sound of gentle waves rolling below the cliffside. I woke early, not from nerves. Those had faded, but from the feeling that today marked a shift, a turning point. One I had waited for, even if I never admitted it to myself until now. My phone buzzed. A message from Luca. Everything is set. Staff is briefed. Ballroom is prepped. We begin at noon. I replied with a thumbs up, then took my time getting ready. A white sleeveless jumpsuit tapered at the waist, gold cuffs at the wrists, hair down in loose waves, soft makeup, and the sapphire ring my grandmother left me. The look was deliberate, clean, professional, regal, but understated. It didn't scream for attention. It simply expected it. At 11:45, I left the suite and descended to the main floor through a private corridor that led to the east wing, where the ballroom waited. It had been transformed overnight. Round tables covered in white linen, a branded backdrop featuring my firm's logo alongside the resort's, and soft instrumental music playing over the sound system. The family thought it was a corporate event they'd been invited to by the manager as a surprise, one of the perks of their complimentary executive upgrade. They had no idea they were the guests of honor, and the lesson. I waited just outside the side entrance as Luca welcomed the group. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we're honored to host a private showcase today. The CEO of one of our primary partners is here to share a few words and personally thank some of our most valued guests. Please enjoy your champagne. She'll be with you shortly." I could hear the murmur of voices, the clink of glasses, chairs being pulled back, a few polite laughs, then silence. My cue. I stepped through the side doors, back straight, chin high, the heels of my sandals echoing softly across the marble floor. It took them a few seconds to register. First my niece, her glass halfway to her lips, then my brother, who did a double take, then Mom. Her mouth opened slightly, eyes darting toward Luca, then back to me. She looked confused, disoriented, like her mind couldn't compute the scene unfolding. "Good afternoon," I said, standing at the front of the room with calm authority. "Thank you all for being here." Stillness. I let the silence stretch a moment longer, then continued. "My name is Claire Moretti. I'm the founder and CEO of Moretti Strategies, a brand consultancy that partners with luxury hospitality brands around the world, including this one." I paused again. "I'd like to extend a personal welcome to our guests here today, especially the Moretti family." The gasp was audible. Olivia looked at me with wide eyes. Mark's hand dropped from his wine glass. Tessa blinked hard, as if trying to convince herself she was dreaming. My mother? Still frozen, like a statue carved from disbelief. "This resort," I continued, "is one of our portfolio's flagship partners. We helped redesign their brand identity, guest experience, and digital strategy. I've worked closely with the management team here since the early planning stages. Some of the artwork you see on the walls was curated from a collection I personally sourced. The champagne you're drinking? Bottled under a private label we launched last year." I smiled gently. "And the reason you're in upgraded suites, enjoying complimentary services, and sitting in this room is because I asked them to take care of you." My voice never wavered. Not once. I let the words settle. Not in anger, not in superiority. In truth. For the first time in years, I wasn't begging to be seen. I simply stood where I belonged. "I'd like to invite Luca to present a small gift to each of our guests. A token of appreciation for being part of this experience." Luca stepped forward, handing out gift bags with custom notes, luxury skincare kits, and personalized itinerary folders for the rest of their stay. Each one was labeled, "Courtesy of Claire Moretti." No one spoke. Until finally, my father. He rose slowly from his seat and looked at me across the table. "Claire," he began, voice thick, "why didn't you tell us?" And I answered simply, Because you never asked. Then I turned, thanked the staff, and exited through the same side door I came in through. Not with drama, not with tears, but with dignity. And behind me, I left a room full of people still trying to understand how the daughter they had dismissed had just redefined every rule they thought they understood. I didn't go back to the ballroom. After the reveal, I walked the long outer corridor of the resort until I reached the sculpture garden overlooking the coast. A place of silence and wind. A place meant for reflection. I sat on the marble bench tucked beneath a flowering trellis, closed my eyes, and let the sea speak. I didn't feel triumphant. Not exactly. There was no applause, no parade. Only the satisfying weight of my own stillness. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't editing myself to make others more comfortable. I wasn't explaining or softening or proving. I had simply stood in my truth. And that was enough. A soft voice pulled me from the breeze. "Claire?" I opened my eyes. It was Olivia, my niece, standing a few feet away, fidgeting with the hem of her sundress. "Can I sit?" she asked. I nodded, gesturing to the empty space beside me. She lowered herself onto the bench and sat in silence for a moment, legs tucked beneath her, eyes on the sea. "That was really intense," she said finally. I gave a soft chuckle. Yeah, it was. They didn't know anything. Number they didn't. "I think I'm the only one who suspected something," she added, glancing at me. "You were just different this time. Confident. Like you didn't care if anyone approved." "I didn't," I said simply. She nodded, pulling her knees to her chest. "They've always talked about you like you were the difficult one," she admitted, her voice quiet. "But I never really understood why. You've always been the one who showed up. You came to every recital. You helped me pick out my first laptop. And you never bragged about anything." I turned to look at her, heart softening. "Thank you." She hesitated, then said, "I think they just don't know how to deal with someone who doesn't need them." That landed hard. Not cruel, just accurate. I didn't need their approval. I never had. But I had wanted something more dangerous than that. I had wanted to be understood. We sat for a while longer before Olivia stood, brushing off her dress. "I think they're all kind of freaking out," she said with a smirk. "Dad said you staged an ambush." Grandma looked like she saw a ghost. Grandpa keeps checking his phone like he's trying to figure out what planet he's on. I couldn't help but laugh. "That sounds about right." She gave me a sideways hug, awkward, teenaged, but sincere. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. Then she disappeared down the garden path. By the time I returned to my suite that evening, the sun had begun to dip below the horizon, casting the resort in golden pink light. On the table inside my suite, I found 3 envelopes, each one handwritten, each from a different member of my family. I sat down and opened them, one by one. From Dad. "Claire, I don't know how to begin. I thought I knew who you were, focused, serious, too busy for all of this. But the truth is, I didn't know anything. Not really. And that's on me. I see now that you've built something extraordinary. And I see how blind we've been. I'm sorry for not seeing you sooner. Dad from Mark, my older brother. Claire, look, I'm not great with words, but I owe you an apology. We treated you like a footnote for years, and then we were surprised when you didn't beg for a seat at the table. The truth is, we should have been asking you how to build the damn table in the first place. Mark. From Mom. Claire, I'm still trying to process everything. I want you to know that I never intended to hurt you. But I see now how my words, my choices, have done just that. I was wrong. You're not too serious. You're not difficult. You're extraordinary. And I hope somehow we can rebuild. Mom. I placed the letters gently on the table and sat back, letting the words sink in. They didn't erase everything, but they mattered. For years, I had lived in the shadows of their expectations. Too much, too little, Too different. I had built walls to protect myself, made peace with being on the outside. But now, the walls were still there, but the doors were open. They could walk through if they were willing to meet me where I truly was, not where they remembered me to be. As the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, I poured a glass of wine and stepped onto the terrace. The air smelled of rosemary and salt. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the invisible daughter. I felt like me, seen, rooted. The morning of our final day arrived slowly, wrapped in a thick hush that felt different from the previous days. The usual hum of chatter over breakfast had been replaced by a tentative quiet. No more smug laughter. No clinking of glasses or careless teasing. Instead, soft greetings, side glances, and something unfamiliar from my family. Respect. I watched from the upper terrace as they gathered near the garden patio, each of them dressed for the group tour of the coastal vineyards. An outing they had signed up for long before knowing I'd be there. No one had mentioned canceling. Instead, they looked unsure. Like they didn't know where to place me now that I no longer fit into the role they'd assigned me years ago. And honestly, I didn't fit there anymore. I wasn't trying to. That was the beauty of all this. I hadn't changed to prove them wrong. I had simply shown them the version of me they had chosen not to see. And now they were left to catch up. I decided to walk with them to the shuttle. Not to confront, but to offer something else. Closure. Mom noticed me first. Her shoulders tensed before relaxing. "Claire?" she said, almost too softly. "Morning," I replied, falling into step beside her. We walked in silence for a few beats. "I meant what I wrote," she said. "In the letter." I nodded. "I know. I don't expect forgiveness overnight." I stopped, turned to her. "I'm not holding a grudge," I said calmly, "but I am done trying to earn love that should have been offered unconditionally." Her eyes welled slightly. She nodded. "I understand." Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. But she wanted to. And that was enough for now. The vineyard tour was relaxed, scenic, a buffer between tension and understanding. I stayed near Olivia, who walked beside me like an anchor, asking questions about the wine, the land, my business. It was only halfway through the tasting that I realized my brothers had shifted. They weren't cracking jokes at my expense. They weren't ignoring me. They were listening. When I explained the role of digital strategy in boutique hospitality success, Mark leaned in and said, "You ever think about teaching this stuff?" It wasn't much, but it was new. The final evening, I returned to the terrace where I had watched them that first night. Only this time, I wasn't an outsider. I was just me. Claire, daughter, CEO, woman who didn't need to be less to be included. Luca joined me briefly, 2 glasses of Prosecco in hand. "You did it," he said, raising his glass. "I didn't do it to win," I replied. "No," he agreed, "but you did win something. Just not what they expected." We clinked glasses. As the sun dipped below the sea, my family gathered for one last group photo. This time, they looked for me. "Claire?" Olivia called, waving me over. "Come on, we need you in this one." I hesitated, then walked over slowly. Mom moved aside to make space next to her, and as I stepped in, she rested her hand gently on my shoulder. Not possessive, not performative, tentative. A quiet olive branch. The photographer counted down. 3, 2, 1. Click. I didn't know what the photo would look like, but I knew how I felt standing there. Not like a footnote, not like a ghost, but like a person who had returned not to be accepted, but to be seen for who she always was. The next morning, I left before them. I didn't say long goodbyes. I didn't need a dramatic exit. I simply checked out, thanked the staff, and walked through the lobby like someone who didn't have to prove a thing. Luca met me at the car. "I hope this won't be your last visit," he said. I smiled. "Next time, I won't bring an audience." As the car pulled away, I looked back one last time. Not at the resort. At the woman I had been when I arrived. Invisible. Excluded. Hurt. And at the woman I was now. Seen. Solid. Unshaken. This wasn't just a story about revenge. It was a story about reclamation. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is show up as yourself. Fully. Unapologetically. And let the truth do the talking. And when they finally see you, you'll realize you never needed their invitation. You were always the one holding the key.